All right. Hello, John.
Hi, Ruth.
Thanks for talking to me.
It's a pleasure.
And yeah, let's begin with where it all began. So, when did you first encounter the Alexander technique, and how did it happen that you took lessons?
Well, I suppose, primarily a violinist, and that's my thing. And I went to music college when I was 17. And I gradually began to notice during my first year of study that I was getting stuck. I was beginning to work very hard. I don't mean that I was practicing hard. I was practicing hard, but I was making a lot of effort to play. And that kind of crept up on me, but I knew that it was like, this is not right. And then I was lucky that a friend of mine, a fellow student of mine, said that, oh, there's this amazing woman, you should go and see her. So I did. And that was, I won't say it was a turning point, because it took me a while before I began to think, oh, this is really interesting. It was intriguing, this strange woman who I couldn't make her out, she was like a bit weird. And she told me that I was basically twisting myself up and blah, blah, But it was really interesting. I knew that she was, without formulating it to myself, I knew that she was a remarkable person. And after a few lessons, I had what they call an aha experience, where I picked up the violin and something had changed. It was as if I'd gone back to how I felt when I was younger. And then I was hooked. I thought, this is really interesting. And so I began to take very seriously what Jean was doing. She wasn't an Alexander teacher, but she kind of moved in the Alexander teacher's circle, and she refused to be labeled because she wanted to just use her intuition. She'd been influenced also by Feldenkrais and various other people. And so I worked with her every week, pretty much, for my entire college career, which was 3 years. And she undoubtedly taught me more than any other teacher at that time, My violin teacher was nothing like as interesting as what I was doing with Jean. And gradually she kind of turned the whole thing on its head for me, so I began to feel I could actually play with freedom and ease. And then I went abroad, and I was having to be my own influence, as it were. When I came back, I reconnected a bit with Jean, but I didn't, I wasn't going every week by any means. And then I got a job as a full-time violinist. And one of my friends was having lessons in the Alexander technique. So he said, oh, go and see my teacher. He's a really interesting guy, you know. Yeah, so I did, and that was my first taste of hard line Alexander technique, if you like. There's many similarities with what I was doing with Jean, but it's a different approach, a little bit more stylized, a little bit more, you know, not improvisatory, if you like. Yeah, which Jean had always been. And so that was a new direction, which I appreciated and enjoyed in a way. And then after a few years, I had some very interesting opportunities to teach the violin at a high level. And I thought, well, if I'm going to teach, I've got to be able to hand on what I'd received. The only way to do that is to get a piece of paper on your wall that says you're qualified. So I gave up my job and trained.
You got that job to teach, and while you were teaching, you had the impression that wasn't enough.
Yes.
And you wanted to kind of include
Yes.
the whole physical side a bit more.
Right. That's right.
So the decision to do the training is quite a big decision.
It was a big decision.
As it is a big commitment and so on, to train for 3 years full time and so on. So usually it takes quite a while to get to that point. How did that happen for you?
Well, I had sort of vaguely been thinking about it, that it's something I would like to do at some stage, you know. And then I went through a bit of a crisis. My first marriage broke up, and I was having some acupuncture to help me through that difficult time. And my acupuncturist, I was talking to him a bit about, you know, what should I do? And I'm going to change direction a bit, you know. And I was thinking about doing an acupuncture training, and he said, no, don't do that, John. So I said, well, I'd really like to train Alexander technique, but I'd have to give up my job. And he just told me, oh, do it. Go on, get on with it. And that was enough of a push, you know. Oh, okay. So I did.
So how did you find the school where you trained?
Yeah, nice, good. By the time I started training, I'd done quite a lot of work, you know. I'd done all that work with Jean, and I'd done some work with this teacher, the first teacher, Orthodox teacher I had, who was MacDonald trained. He sent me to MacDonald's class, which I attended a bit. So this was kind of familiar ground to me, because the Ribeaux where I trained, they were MacDonald style. Yeah. So I was quite good at it, you know, kind of thing. Yeah. So it was fine. There were obviously some difficulties and changes and so on and so forth, but on the whole, it wasn't a very difficult ride for me.
When was that?
That was, I started in '86, and I was 36 years old. And at the same time, I was teaching in a music conservatory in Finland, which is another story. Through a really random chance thing, I got this job in Finland, and they were interested in me, partly because they knew I was doing the Alexander training and I would qualify and then be able to teach. They were really interested in that. So that's partly why I got the job.
Mm.
And I used to travel there once a month for a week. And I would teach like crazy for a week and then come back and spend 3 weeks.
While you were still training?
While I was still training, yeah. And
wow.
And Ellie and Peter were very generous, they accepted that in a way. And I did my best not to miss too much of the school. And I'm lucky I have good health, so I was never off sick or anything, yeah. And when I finished my training, I started teaching a little bit in Finland, which was a great opportunity. And I also got a job at the Royal College Junior Department, where I had been teaching violin on and off, as a deputy teacher. I'd filled in for. So they knew me and I knew them. And so I was lucky to get a position there as well. And then in a way came a very interesting period for me, because I was trying to integrate my training, which I had great respect for, with what I'd done with Jean, which was not a million miles away, but a different approach that was based much more on, how can I say, it's very difficult to put into words, intuitive response to the person and what they were experiencing and what their problems, how their problems were presenting. And yeah, so I was trying to sort of integrate that with the more formal approach that I'd obviously been taught in my training. I'm not sure how successful I was in a way. And then other influences came in. When I finished training, I had a phone call from David Gorman, who at that time was still running a training course in Alexander Technique in North London. And he ran courses for newly graduated teachers, like get together and talk about this and that, and and he invited me to go, and okay, great. I didn't know David before, except as a name, so I went along, and that was really interesting because it was so radically different from my training, a completely different way of looking at the whole business, and different again from what Jean was doing, and so that was another big influence on me in a way. Or, I was kind of like, how do I knit these things together in a way that's meaningful for me?
Yeah.
And then, again, through David, I went to Barbara Conable's weekend workshop or whatever. She came to London, and gave a 2 or 3 day workshop, and which I went to. Now that was very interesting because she was working with body mapping and your sense of your own structure and how your sense of yourself and your vision of your own structure and your awareness of your own structure relates to how you move. And how, if your basic conception of yourself is a bit wonky, your movements will reflect that. And this was not a million miles away from what Jean was doing. Jean believed very much in having a sense of structure. It was one of her primaries. You have a sense of your own structure. You've got a bony structure which you appreciate, and you develop a certain awareness of its nature, if you like. Mm. So that in a way was very helpful, and I actually went so far as to go to America to spend a week with Barbara twice. And she was very generous. I worked with her quite intensively for a week, and then I went back and watched her working with other people, and blah blah. Yeah, very interesting. So that was another big influence on me that I felt I had to integrate into the way I was working. Meanwhile, the Ribeaux has asked me to be an assistant on their course, which of course was a great honour in a way. I think I was the only student who was doing that.
Former student.
Former student, yes.
How long after your graduation?
A year, or not that long, actually. A year or two. And that, of course, brought its own interest. I mean, it's great to have all those students to work on. And slightly difficult in a way, because I was already beginning to feel that, I wanted to be experimental, at least. And I didn't want to push the boat out too far, in that circumstance. Obviously, I needed to follow the line of the school. But the students seemed to appreciate what I was doing, and, it went okay. It was fine. And then I was by this time teaching also at Trinity, where I started off just giving a couple of talks on Alexander technique to the students, and they were interested, so they gave me a little bit of time for individual lessons. And then they wanted to introduce Alexander technique as a core part of the curriculum, which is great, except, of course, it was all in classes. So, I remember actually going to the organizers and saying, look, this is not going to work. First of all, it's very difficult to teach Alexander technique in a class. It's a one-to-one thing, essentially. The other thing is, these kids are going to come straight from school, and they come to college and they see their timetable and it says Alexander technique. Oh, what's that? I'd learnt by this time that it's no use working with somebody unless the person you're working with perceives a need to change. There has to be some recognition. Something is not quite right, and I want to change.
Yeah.
Now, if you get a group of 18-year-old first-year students, they all think, well, okay, all I've got to do is practice, and then I'll be a world superstar. This is really, not far from the way that they think. They haven't yet come to the point where they see maybe it's not quite so simple.
Yeah, well, they made it through the application process.
Yeah, that's
from
right.
300. They were among the 10 who were
that's right.
taken, so they are already superstars.
Yeah, that's right. So I thought, well, but I couldn't say, no, I'm not going to do that, because I was building my career. So I said, okay, well, let's give it a whirl. So I started, and I found in a way that I was good at it. I could... The students could relate to me. First of all, I'm a professional violinist. Okay, so it's like, all right, well, he's obviously been through it. Yeah. And I used, to a certain extent, what I'd got from Barbara, who was very good at that kind of thing, working with a group. Yeah. Mm. And gradually I built my own approach, which the students were, on the whole, very positive. And it was mostly based on a theoretical understanding of some of the principles of Alexander and body mapping, and talking about this very subtle relationship between effort and energy put in, and how this, this kind of whole complex of how trying harder doesn't work, kind of thing, which was interesting for them, I think. And then I would film them individually, playing in front of the class, and I would give them a chance to speak about their experience, what they feel, and then I would work with them a bit and maybe make some suggestions, some adjustments with my hands and whatnot, and then they would have to watch the playback. Mm. And that was always very interesting. Yeah. Because in those days, nobody had mobile phone. Or, to see yourself, it was quite a rarity in a way. So that was, I think, interesting and valuable. And all this time, I was sort of, searching, what am I doing with this thing? What? And with myself as well. I was still really searching, I know I'd had some really interesting experiences playing where things had just worked. Mm. And then some difficulties, and
So you had different influences, different stages in your teaching.
Very much so.
You did individual and group work, a lot of group work.
Yeah.
So how did your understanding of the technique now from the content side of things evolve over the many years?
I suppose one thing that changed quite a lot, although I'd had hints of it with Jean. I remember Jean once said to me in a lesson, "You're very good at fighting yourself, aren't you, John?" That was a very typical Jean statement. You know, just like an aside, you know. Yeah. And gradually, over this long period, I began to see that this element of trying, of, I suppose, in a way, end gaining, you could put it in Orthodox Alexander terms, like, yeah, I'm not good enough. I've got to get better. It's got to be better. That's not good enough. I've got to be better than that. I've got to play better than that. So how do I do that? I pump energy in. You know, this was my world. Yeah. I got it from my upbringing, I suppose, as so many of us do. And gradually it began to dawn on me that this is a very, very big factor. And I saw quite clearly, in a way, that with one hand I was doing my best to open myself up, to expand, to open, to free myself. But with the other hand, I was trying desperately hard to play well. And I began to see that this is like, there's a big conflict there. And so little by little, I began to look much more at underlying attitudes and conceptions of what is taking place when we play an instrument or do any complex activity, if you like. Yeah. And as nearly all my work was with musicians, of course, with the exception of the training school teaching, this was really interesting confrontation to see or to work with people in such a way that I could begin to get a feeling of what their idea was of what they were doing and how that might be contributing towards the difficulties that they were experiencing. And so this was a very gradual process, but lots of ups and downs.
So would you say the trying mind is the most important aspect, or working with the trying mind is the most important aspect of the technique for you, or?
That's a good question, Ruth. I'm not sure how to answer that, because I'd had such positive experiences before that began to be like a realization for me that that was very significant. So I would almost say that the experiences I'd had on a more basic physical level, if you like, of reorganizing myself, getting a sense of balance, a sense of openness, of flow in my body. That then enabled me constructively to look at this other element, which was more to do with my conception of what I was doing and how I was thinking and yeah.
And in terms of teaching students or pupils or clients, what is the most important aspect for you? What are you looking for or aiming at, or I don't know how to put it?
Certainly if I'm working with an individual, and I do a fair amount of work with individual, usually musicians, who've got themselves into a bit of a tangle. Either they've got pain, or they are very frustrated, or, you know, they've come up against a brick wall, or, you know, this is very common in the music world. And I nearly always ask the person to play for me something, nothing, you know, not a big deal, but just, you know, I'd like to get a taste of what I feel when I watch you play. And then I will ask them what they feel. And then I will respond to the situation in a way that I just feel this is going to be helpful for this person. It might be, okay, put the instrument away, let's get on the table. Or it might be just some simple work with the chair. Or it might be talking to them about how they're thinking about what they are doing. And it might be all three in one lesson. So the most important thing for me is to engage the person in a joint exploration of what they feel, which may well, of course, be full of misconceptions and faulty awareness or whatever, but has to be respected. I want to know what they feel, and then what I feel, and a kind of, I suppose I could say, intuitive response to the situation. And I hope at that point that the person will pick up something, you know, from what I've said. It's not easy, because what I see very clearly again and again is that habits are unbelievably strong.
Yes.
To chip away at somebody's habit, and the habits that we get as instrumentalists, for example, they are deep. You know, most of the people who come to me for help, they've probably been playing since they were 5 years old, and they've practiced for hours. And they've been to music college, and they kill themselves, you know, for hours in a practice room. And then they're asked to think differently about what they are doing. This is extraordinarily difficult, even though they may be suffering.
And there are the other teachers who have an influence as well, and they have an opinion about how they should
That's right. And this is another element, you know, when I'm working with music college students, for example, the instrumental teacher is God. The instrumental teacher knows everything. Yeah, and he's told me my elbow's too high, or my elbow's too low, or yeah. And I've heard it all. I mean, I'm sorry to say that the conception that most instrumental teachers, in my experience, have about the work that we are doing is to say it's superficial is to overpraise it. It's just ridiculous. They think that I'm teaching them how to stand, or something like that.
Yeah.
And or maybe how to relax. You need to relax. You need to relax. Go and see the Alexander teacher. They'll show you how to relax. Oh yeah, stuff like that. I mean, okay, fair enough. But and then if the instrumental teacher says anything to counter what I'm saying, or the singing teacher, or whatever it is, then I'm lost. Yeah, that's it, finished.
Yeah.
They will follow that. In the majority of cases, vast majority of cases, yeah.
Yeah, probably not easy.
It's not easy.
And with Alexander students, the situation is a little bit different.
It's a little bit different, of course. But even then, nowadays, you get an Alexander teacher come, Alexander pupil come, and they've done Pilates, and they've tried this, and they went to the osteopath who told them, well, one leg's shorter than the other, so I have this big problem, or, you name it. They've got some preconceived ideas about stuff.
Yeah.
And they've also picked up, very, very many people now, it's part of our culture in a way, isn't it, that the body is a thing which needs to be fixed. Yeah. So show me how to fix it. My body, or the body. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's become a thing.
Yeah.
That is divorced from me, and that's very difficult. Very difficult to turn that around. Yeah.
That brings me to your very special use of language when you teach. Words and of course your hands have a big influence, but your words are also, I found that always very special and very often spot on, and somehow metaphorically, but still spot on. And can you say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is not something that I've deliberately cultivated, Ruth, although I suppose I've picked up things from all the teachers I've spoken about, in a way. But it's something that's evolved almost instinctively for me, I suppose, as a result of my own work on myself. And it's something that I kind of enjoy doing. It comes very naturally to me to pick up, in a way, something that's just going to be appropriate to say. to somebody at a certain moment. And I think this is very important in a way. You know, I think one thing about Alexander teachers in general, and of course, you know, it's a very wide field, isn't it? It's a very wide field. But it's so easy. We've all been through, or most of us, been through this 3-year training. And we're totally habituated to the whole scene of getting in and out of a chair and, you know, going onto your toes and you know, I don't know what else, yeah, depending on your nature of your training. This was very highlighted for me by a comment that I heard from a colleague, or yeah, who said, I was chatting to her at a party, and she said, I said, you know, I do some work with Alexander technique too. She said, oh, do you? Oh, that's very interesting. My husband's been having Alexander lessons. He goes every week. He's been going for 6 months. Yes. But the teacher still won't let him sit down by himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, this is understandable, isn't it? It's understandable. But you see the absolute failure of our ability to communicate to the student, what are we doing? Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
What's the aim of this? And not only that, but we have to do that and make sure that the student has actually taken it on board.
Mm. So how do you communicate that with beginners?
Yeah, with beginners. Well, I will certainly, what I used to do at junior college, I gave them all a sheet or a couple of sheets which I'd written myself about. This is what the Alexander technique is about. And I would try to get them to read it. I don't know whether they read it. I hope they read it. And then I would refer to it in a way in the lessons that I was giving, that, you know, so we are looking at our habits and we're seeing how our habits present themselves in various activities, including going from standing to sitting, and how we can cut across our habit and find a more harmonious and integrated way of being, if you like. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't use those words with a 15-year-old, you know, but well, depending on the 15-year-old, of course. But yeah. But it is a real problem. It's a very, very real problem for all teachers, I think. And I often thought, you know, at the end of a year at junior college, if I'd had students for a year, let's say, I should give them a sheet of paper and say, okay, I want you to write down what you think you've learnt from these lessons.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
But you never did.
I never did it. I was too scared. Yeah.
Yeah. So you are giving an introduction to what, in your view, the Alexander technique is.
Yes.
To everyone
in very broad terms. I want to make it quite clear that we're looking at a bigger picture than how to stand right and how to sit down. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I hope I succeeded, but I'm not sure. And of course, it has to be said, in that particular case, half of them were there because their teacher had told them, you know, that, look, go and have some Alexander technique because you're very stiff. So they end up coming to me and they don't really know what you know. My teacher told me I'm stiff. You know, oh boy, what a starting point that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Very difficult. Very difficult. They don't feel stiff. They're just told that they're stiff.
Yeah.
So I've had it all, really, in that very difficult circumstance. And you have to just do your best, make it fun. And I must say, the students, in general, the students loved coming for the lesson because it was like, no pressure.
Yeah, for once.
For once. Little window in their day, you know, like, oh. Yeah. Otherwise, they're being like, no, not good enough. No, you haven't practiced enough. No. Yeah. From morning till night.
What do you think, or why do you think is it that so many artists of all kinds are drawn towards the Alexander technique?
Well, yeah, I think, I mean, if I think about my own experience and I think this is fairly typical, actually, in the music performance world, if you like. I had experiences as a child or as a young person, like teenager, whatever, where playing was just playing. And, you know, I was quite good at it and I loved music and I had some very nice opportunities. And then, you know, you play a Brahms symphony in the local youth orchestra or whatever it might be, and it's like, it's magic. It's just magic. It's like, oh, wow. And there's no, like, judgment, relatively little judgment enters into the picture. Okay, I know I could do better, but, you know, it's just like, it's a flow experience. It is a flow experience. Yeah. And then it begins to disappear because you have to pass exams and you have to do assessments and your teacher says, no, don't play it like that. That's not, no, it doesn't go, no, you've got the wrong end of the stick there. Play it like this. And that's, you know, who can survive that? And flow? The super gifted can, yeah. But your average Joe, even the talented ones, they can't survive that. And the whole business of becoming a skilled musician at a high level becomes a battle. But there's something inside that knows, oh, there's another way. There's another way. Because I remember, I didn't used to be like this. Yeah.
So from flow to profession, there's the battle in between, and pressure from outside.
Pressure from outside. And in the classical music world particularly, there are kind of accepted ways to do things, you know, which one can understand. I mean, there are sort of stylistic considerations. You know, you play Mozart like this, you know, like, and you mustn't step outside a certain boundary, you know. So, and in a way, I would say I almost agree with that, but it's imposed on people.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so difficult for the instrumental teacher or the vocal teacher or whatever. You know, I used to have this philosophy. Look, I don't want to tell you how to play this piece. You know, you go away and you feel your way with it, and you know, do the best you can, and okay. And they come back next week and they play this piece that you're exploring or whatever, and they play it, and oh God, no, not like that. And then what do? You have to be so skillful if you're not going to basically say, no, sorry, no, not like that. You know, and still give them the feeling that they are playing from their own feeling. Because this is what we want. We want to play from our own feeling. That's why we do it. We want to do this, communicate. How many people, high level, at music institutions have that feeling? Practically none.
Yeah.
I can tell you that from years of experience. It's not part of the game. No, it's all externalized. It's, you know, it's all like put into box ticking. You know, vibrato, yes, vibrato quite good, but not varied enough. Bow control, yes, well, there were moments, weren't there, where your bow was really not well controlled, and your intonation, mostly very good, but occasional lapses. And stylistically, yes, it was okay, but you need to find more range of expression, and so on.
Yeah.
Tick box, tick box, tick box. Nobody's saying, well, I'm sorry, it was dead boring and I didn't feel you were communicating at all. They don't say that.
Yeah.
They say that your bow control wasn't very good. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So technical aspects.
Yeah, technical aspects.
Yeah, so...
And these things, they play directly into the muscular system. This is the important thing for me. If you're not expressing, you are doing the reverse of expressing. What's the reverse of expressing? It's pulling yourself in.
Yeah.
And this is what tension is.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah.
So finding the free expression.
Yeah.
Or finding it again.
Yes. And this is very, very difficult in a world that is policed by stylistic correctness and parameters, you know, and then you've got to score points in your exam, and you know, it's understandable why it's all come about, but you know, it's far from the meaning of it, you know. It's
yeah. So in the classical world, it seems to be especially extreme.
It's extreme. It is extreme.
It's not only musicians. It's of course also actors.
Yes.
But also visual artists.
Yeah.
Well. Like
Yeah.
Who find the technique.
Yes.
And also train. So it's understandable that musicians, for practical, technical, physical reasons, take lessons. But why do so many art people, let's say, train and find this this kind of like that? This
isn't that interesting? Yeah.
The non-graspable nature of the work.
Yes. So interesting, Ruth, so interesting.
Maybe that is somehow similar to
I think
art.
I think it is. I think it is. And this feeling of connecting with a side of yourself which is essential in the best meaning of the word. Essential in that it's of your essence. You're connecting with your essence. Yeah. Which is the side of yourself that drew you into this world in the first place, you know, like the world of creativity or whatever. And then starts to get overlaid with your education.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that the technique can do without saying anything about it at all is to provide a connection with that essence without words. Just through touch and presence and quietness. Yeah, quietness.
Beautiful.
And, you know, this tension in the neck that, you know, we all free your neck, yeah, neck free, yeah, neck free, blah, 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 yeah, okay, fine. Tension in the neck, in my opinion, is you cut from your deepest self. Yeah. So it's not surprising that if we manage, by hook or by crook, to free somebody's neck, they respond to it. If they're sensitive. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, sensitivity is also the connection, I think.
Yeah.
Artists, people who go into that direction are usually sensitive.
And of course, and they value beauty and and silence even.
Actually, that was a very nice ending. Ending with silence.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you. Thanks, Ruth.